Right, members, we are back in open now. We're back on the webcast. So we can move into debate now on the... I think we ought to thank Mr Bailey for his report and for answering all these questions. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Now, who wants to open the debate? Councillor Potter.
Not necessarily, Chairman. I just want to seek your advice, if I may, reminding you of what I said earlier on in the meeting, that I do have a revision to the recommendation that's before us, which I'd like to put to the committee at some time. And now we're moving into debate. I would argue, I think, that it would be helpful, I hope, to committee to have a hard copy of what I've prepared. I'm sure there'll be colleagues around the table who say, why have you got such a large preamble? I'm looking at Gavin on my right. But most of it is, I believe, factual, chronological and direct quotes, and therefore quotes from the URS report, which all of you will have read avidly, and therefore will not be surprised by any of those. And the last 2 or 3 paragraphs are the key areas, dare I say it, that actually seeks a change in terms of the position this committee might adopt as a recommendation. So that's what I seek to put forward at some stage, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Potter. Yeah, I'll just remind the committee that what we're supposed to be doing is to note the progress made and to provide comments, but to help the MEC. So if that's encompassed in your proposal, please circulate it now.
Well, I mean, mine goes a stage further than that, Chairman, as you're unsurprised to hear, really. There'd be no point in me having a revision of it. Didn't do a bit more than that. But can I put it around and then you can go from there? If I hand all of them to you first and you can distribute it by instruction.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for this, Councillor Potter? Thank you, Councillor Keating. Yeah. So, when you have read this, we can discuss this actual paper. So shall I ask you, Councillor Potter, do you wish to speak to your paper now?
With your agreement, Chairman, I will. I mean, I don't know whether that assists members or not, really, in the context of the debate you want to have, and I'm sure I'll be told not by somebody. But, I mean, clearly, I do this with a genuine degree of sadness, may I say, really, because in terms of Mallydown, which I care deeply about and always have done, I've had a passion, I have to say, for the proper and exemplary development of this site. And I had a while ago started to believe that following the judicial review that we would all be pulling in the same direction in regard to the development that we would look forward to in due course. I fear, without naming names, there are some people inside our tent who are still intent on destructive elements, tendencies in regard to what we are seeking to propose for Mallydown. And I don't want, and I know I made the comment originally and it doesn't relate to the paper we've just considered. I don't want us to be again hauled before the High Court in regard to our actions as the landowner. Now, I said originally as well, I've been impressed by the integrity, I think, really, and the very clear comments made by URS and other consultants in this matter. But it's obvious that their commentary in their own report suggests some real concerns to us all, really. And the words that I've quoted there, as I say, appear within the URS report. They are not my own, they're actual transcripts from that report. And I think, in regard to the position that we find ourselves in, where, as I think Councillor Keating said, and a lot of us pay tribute, I think, to Councillor Raphael as the Cabinet member for his substantial work that he did towards the Council meeting on the 25th of July, where lots of things were changing literally hour by hour, and he was working well into the early hours of the morning to change things. But one of the things that was changed, obviously, was the issues around Malidown, which I think could come back and haunt us. And I think it's appropriate that we have an opportunity of revisiting that. So what this this proposal I have in front of the committee does is seek to change the recommendation relating to the report, a very good report, by the way, and for that actually to ask, remind the Malidown Executive Committee of its own decision notices and the obligation to promote the land following the High Court judgment where the Cabinet had been deemed to act irrationally and unlawfully, well, the whole Council had. We recommend that the Malidown Executive Committee take the necessary steps to avoid these criticisms being levelled at the Cabinet again, and clearly that's a very clear thing that they can do if they so choose. And that we as a committee request an update on the land holding issues before the end of the calendar year, and that in order to further safeguard the Council's interest, that the P&I Ofcom is given the opportunity to review and make recommendations on the local plan following public consultation, but prior to it being presented to the planning inspector. I think by that process, and it is the P&I committee that would have that planning observation responsibility, that we can avoid some of the worst pitfalls that we may experience in respect of the way we've proceeded thus far on this exercise. I say it in front of Councillor, I have every respect for the work that he is doing. I've been impressed as a member of the Members Advisory Panel, and I know Councillor Tilbury has, and I think Councillor Keating, of the energy and the enthusiasm that he's displayed on that. I'm somewhat doubtful on occasions that he's getting quite the collective support he needs from his own Cabinet, but that's for him to reflect upon and deal with, and I'm sure he does that in his own way. But I want to protect the interests of this Council, and it seems to me that if we genuinely believe that Malidown should now be proactively promoted and developed, and it becomes the exemplary development that all of us have alluded to, and I hate to say it, I've been involved in this for longer than I care to remember, then I think we really do need to start trying to get everybody saying the same things, all pulling in the same direction. And I fear we're not doing that at the present time, and I think we need to have a fresh look at this and to seek the input of P&I in that regard. So this is the revision that I put forward tonight, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Keating, you seconded it. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Chair. Can I say that I was saddened that we ended up at the High Court as a Borough Council being told that we'd got it wrong, that we were acting unlawfully. Now, that was not an accident. We didn't act unlawfully by accident. We acted unlawfully by political policy of the Tory group. They generally, without exception, that we know of, supported the policy of not developing Malidown. And they implemented that policy, and it was determined to be unlawful. We have since heard from the Cabinet, which is Tory controlled in total, that they will now, they've got the message, as evidenced by the leader who said, we understand, we got the message, we'll develop Malidown. And those of us that have been in support of Mandydown ever since the issue arose were quite pleased that we got to that point. And we were not imposing, suggesting or delaying any matter in relation to Mandydown. And to our surprise, we arrived at the 22nd of July 2013 with somebody without so much as a prior notice to us, that is, to us councillors, that he intended to change the rules between Monday going to Cabinet and Thursday going to full council. Now, that is a total nightmare if you're coming out of a legal position and you're trying to fix the legal position for someone to then say, and by the way, I'm changing the rules. Firstly, he is not a planner. Secondly, I believe we've had confirmed tonight that he produced no master planning evidence to support the change in the boundaries that he put to Cabinet on the 22nd of July and which was endorsed by a majority of the council, but not all, on the 25th of July. There's no master planning evidence to justify the change in the line. The change in the line has a significant impact in relation to the judicial review. It effectively says we will not develop the whole of Mandydown, we'll develop that part of Mandydown which I, Mr. Ruffell, decided. We will exclude from planning and development that part of Mandydown between the dotted line and the rigid line. This bit. We'll exclude from development this is Mandydown land. We'll exclude that from development. Now, first of all, I don't believe he has the right to do that because it would go against the judicial review. But secondly, he brought no evidence of any kind to support that proposition. Not master planning evidence, because that's what boundaries should be created by. You have to have master planning evidence, not legal expertise in defending a crook in the local court. That's what he's got. He's got legal expertise, and I'm sure he's a good lawyer. But you have to have master planning evidence to change significant lines. When I asked the question, why is the line there, he said, in full council, it's all on the webcast, because there's a ridge way. There was a ridge. And I, along with the cabinet member, and some people around this table, went to visit the site. And we said, show us the ridge which is creating this particular line. And the actual answer, reluctantly agreed by some, was there is no ridge. Right? Now I'm talking about people who are standing on the land, on the proposed new line, who are saying there is no difference between that bit of land and that bit of land and there's no ridge between them. Now, there is an element of a ridge on the roadway, but I'm talking about the land all surrounding the line. We know that the full cabinet is actually divided. We have cabinet members who are effectively seeking to undermine the overall proposal to develop Mandydown. If we don't get the output from Mandydown that we're suggesting, then those cabinet members who represent wards adjacent to Mandydown will expect the shortfall in housing development to take place elsewhere. And that's how it is. I believe that we need to tell the executive, the Mandydown executive, and we need to tell the cabinet member here that we support the original boundary because it was master planned evidenced because it complies with the boundaries accepted by the judicial review. It's the same boundary of land ownership, and there is no good reason to change that boundary. I believe we should be telling the cabinet member that, we should be telling the cabinet and the Mandy-Down executive. But apart from that, I've got nothing to say. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Yes, I support this. It's factually based. We are in a period of consultation. The whole point of tonight is our contribution towards that consultation on the draft local plan. And I think it's very important that evidence like this is dragged out and put forward to prove that consultation has been meaningful. I'm not going to make any statements about errors in the past. What's important is we don't make any mistakes in the future. I think this highlights some of the issues that exist in the current local plan. The whole point of having a consultation is that those issues are discovered and found by people, as they clearly have been by some experts and usefully drawn together by Councillor Potter. So I think we should add this to the recommendations as it sits. I think it's important that we prove to the local plan inspector that the consultation was robust and that we've explored everything, and by coming back through P&I, Ofcom as well, and to this committee as a landholding committee, I think it's eminently sensible that that's done. So I think everyone should support this and include it in the recommendations.
Mrs. Tucker.
Thank you. Two things. On this, I wonder if you can explain to me in the last paragraph why it has to go to P&I. Have I misunderstood something? That's my first question.
Well, simply, sorry, Councillor Tucker, the role of P&I, and I mean, members of that committee would tell you the substantial amount of time they spent over many extended meetings actually seeking to help the cabinet member in the formulation of the draft local plan. It falls within their terms of reference to make those observations which they did, and some of which were taken on board by him in regard to all of the sites that were considered under the draft local plan, Mandy-Down being one of those. It is their remit, their responsibility to actually make these observations. Now, it seems to me that isn't part of our remit, and therefore referring our observations to P&I is constitutionally the right way to do it.
Can I come back? Thank you. I still don't understand the landholding issues of it, but what I wanted to say with regard to this, the majority of it is basically the suggested changes on here, which I would be very happy to, or would have been very happy to have moved in any case. So the majority of what is there is certainly what I would be happy to support.
Councillor Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you. First of all, just to say to Councillor Keating, I don't think either of these boundaries are mentioned in the judicial review. That just referred to Mandy-Down land. The boundary that we see in front of us here, the extended one, I think, was in the initial Tibbles report, which was to just parcel up the land so that as landowners, something could be promoted. It wasn't not necessarily adopted, but promoted. And so it was a rough boundary. And I think at the time we all admitted that and all accepted that. If I just say in answer to this ridge or not ridge, if I could just quote the planning inspector of 2005 again, his first sentence is, "Housing is proposed on the western slopes of this ridge." So he obviously saw one. I don't know. Perhaps you didn't have your glasses on. I don't know. Anyway. And I could also just say that we're talking about the proper planning of Mandy-Down, and I'm fully supportive of the proper planning of Mandy-Down. I've settled the issue that Mandy-Down will be developed, but I want it to be developed well. And if we're going to have proper planning, part of that should take into account the protection of the integrity of the surrounding villages. And the question of this boundary is all to do with that, which is a question of proper planning. Proper planning isn't just squeezing as many houses as you can onto as large a plot of land as you can find. It is making sure that we do protect the integrity of villages. So I would just like to say that I'm not happy with this increased western edge, simply because it almost coalesces with Newfound. And to quote the planning inspector before, it will be clearly visible as people drive along, and it isn't the natural boundary for Basingstoke. As far as this is concerned, I have no. The last paragraph is fine. I think it proposes very sensible things. I don't think I want to actually support the whole thing, because I can't support a formal motion that cherry picks critical language of the cabinet and sticks it in, makes them look in an incompetent light. I mean, there are certain things that are said, but to gather them all together in one place is giving a slightly rough idea. But the last paragraph I'd be okay with. Thank you.
Folio holder wish to come in at this point. Please do.
Yes, Councillor Potty, I do understand the thrust of this, and I do understand your disquiet. But I don't think this is going to help. Actually, I think it might in fact hinder us. There are a number of difficulties I have with this. Firstly, it refers to a report from Hampshire County Council. Well, you've seen it, but precious few other people around this table have seen it. Yes, I know, but if we're being asked to pass a motion, vote on a motion on a paper that the councillors here haven't seen, I think that wouldn't make it a very strong recommendation. Secondly, that there's reference here to the cabinet having been deemed to act irrationally, unlawfully. Was it the cabinet? Was it full council? Again, I think you yourself said you referred to full council. So I'm not sure that, again, that's particularly helpful. I'm here as a sort of representative, as the cabinet representative for Mannydown and the representative of the Mannydown Executive Committee. I'm not going to be in a position to direct the cabinet to avoid criticisms being levelled again. And finally, again, as a recommendation to me, I'm not in a position, I don't think, constitutionally to accept a recommendation from this committee that we make requests and that P&I Ofcom is given the opportunity to review and make recommendations on the local plan. Is it the local plan we're talking about here as a whole? I can't act on a recommendation in that context. So, on a number of counts here, I'm afraid that, as I said to you, I think that I understand perfectly well where you're coming from on this, and you know how much I sympathise with a lot of what you're saying here. But I don't think it's going to help.
Chairman, can I just respond to Councillor Isaac, him having raised the issues that he does? I mean, repeating the point, if I may, I mean, I accept, in some ways I'm surprised, obviously there wasn't the knowledge of the Hampshire County report that I've referred to. I mean, it is on the website, it's public information, and therefore, to that extent, any of us here can find that within a matter of seconds. In regard to the role he may have with Cabinet, I mean, as I've said, I mean, I'm sure it's a difficult task bringing the Cabinet along to understand collective responsibility, and I wish him well with that, really. I don't know how well his Cabinet briefing went some time ago. Hopefully they were all there and all paying attention and all supporting him, but that is a role that I think you have. I mean, you're commissioned with the task that you have. It is your responsibility to get your Cabinet colleagues on board, committed to the policy of this council. It doesn't seem to me in any way to be inconsistent And in regard to the last paragraph, I mean, we are, as a committee, requesting and we're asking that P&I is given the opportunity to review. That's a request on behalf of this committee. And it doesn't seem to me that is unreasonable. And as we've said, I think a couple of times this evening, it was and is the P&I's responsibility in regard to those planning aspects of the draft local plan. And clearly, I mean, I understand the point you're making, Councillor Isaac. I'm not talking about observations on the whole of the local plan per se, but this is the Manidown aspect of the local plan. I think anybody reading that would understand where we're coming from, Manidown having been the subject matter of this report in the first place. So I still pursue my argument, Chairman, that this should be considered, I hope, voted on by this committee in due course. Seems I have some support around the room for it already.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Addressing the motion just separately now, but I'd like to just seek clarification, Chair, that after a vote is taken on this, there's still an opportunity for members to put forward suggestions as per the recommendation of the report that may assist.
Sorry, Councillor Parker, a motion's been proposed and is being discussed. We're speaking to that. If that's agreed, that is what goes forward on behalf of this committee to the portfolio holder.
But not in isolation to any other recommendations this committee cares to make. I can't believe that.
Yes, Councillor Parker, if it's agreed as is, that's what goes forward. Members are at liberty to put forward amendments to the proposal on the table from Councillor Potter, but if it goes ahead as is, then and is agreed, this is what goes forward from this committee to the portfolio holder.
The tabling of this putting forward this motion is wrong. The proposer did ask for advice from the chair as to when would be the appropriate time to put forward this proposal. We've had questions of the officer. The officer's given substantive and detailed response to questions that have been made. We are now in a situation then where possible suggestions that have come out of the officer responses are now not going forward because of this motion. So on that basis, I certainly won't support the motion.
I've just had some officers' advice that if you wish to add anything to this, and it's proposed and seconded as an amendment, as in addition to what we've got here, then that would be fine. Councillor Keating.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, Chair, that this motion wasn't intended to subvert the activity and actions and contributions of this committee. It was intended to be a focus of the discussion and the decision making, but not in isolation from the other routine type of recommendations that are part of the report. So it would be, if you like, come at the end of the meeting tonight, and the other items that might be amendments could well, of course, be discussed and agreed or otherwise.
Councillor James.
Chair, I'm rather concerned that if we are now saying that we need to add amendments to this, and I'm assuming that it probably makes sense given the on page 13 and 14 of the report, that policies A to U would probably have to go through agreeing with the officers' proposals and changes to each of those policies, then we're going to have a huge amount of amendments. It seems sensible that the recommendation that we have, 2.1, notes the progress made today, reviews and provides comments. To me, this is one of those comments and is moved as a motion to add, or as a separate recommendation, an additional recommendation. Because if we're going to have to amend it, I'm not quite, it's going to be very, you know, I amend it with the 3 things I want to change about policies, and someone says I want to make 3 amendments as well. You've gone forever.
Councillor James, I might be able to help on that. The proposal before us from Councillor Potter that was seconded is what is being discussed at the moment. If somebody, one of the members, would wish to add the original recommendation as an amendment to this proposal, we can then put in any other comments and pass those also forward to the portfolio holder. But because this has been proposed and seconded, we have to discuss the proposal that's on the table.
Councillor Mrs Tucker.
Thank you. If this is the proposal and we can amend it, I would suggest that we accept the first paragraph and then we go into the suggestions that are already in the paper, which are, some of it is based on that, which I said previously, with the ABCs all the way down, which is recommended to us to accept. And I think there might be 1 or 2 other things. If anybody's got any extras that they might like to add to it, that's what I would suggest. But everything after the first paragraph be deleted.
Is it seconded, Marilyn?
Yes, I'll second.
Can we clarify, please, what the proposal is?
Down to here, I think. Councillor Mrs Tucker, would you please clarify what your amendment is?
Sorry, we accept the first paragraph, but not the bit about Hampshire County Council, which was what you were concerned about. And then we move the recommendations of the suggested changes that are on page 11 of 35, 12 of 35, 13, and then, yes, it goes over to 14 of 35. Does that make sense?
It's specifically the content of 11, 12 and 13 that Councillor Mrs Tucker is now suggesting is agreed as a recommendation that I would like to make a suggested amendment to. So without that opportunity, and so I'm back where I was before, my questioning was in relation specifically to that document and that policy wording, and I now find myself completely frustrated in the sense that I'm not able now, in a positive way, to at least offer some suggested change to the wording. I'm not looking to go through the whole 21 clauses, but I'd like to make specific suggestion to the committee that they consider a change to the 5 of the deletions, actually just a wording, for them not to be completely deleted. Because if I can just say, Chair, to my fellow, no, it sounds insulting, I don't intend to be so, but this is a paper put forward by the landowners. The landowners are seeking to negotiate favourable terms. And Councillor Mrs Taylor has made a very strong point in regard to the extended boundary on the west side, which if she would care to put forward some motion of her own, I probably would support.
I follow that, but you said about taking out references to Hampshire County Council. What?
Report. Report.
So remove the first paragraph and then add in that the committee's comments are noted on section 3.8.13.
3.8.10.
Sorry, so sorry, one sec. Then the committee, so the amendment is take out the first paragraph.
First paragraph.
To be the remainder of the whole. Sorry, this is. Okay. Chair, sorry, to clarify. So the amendment to the proposed recommendation is that the first paragraph remains and that the rest of the proposal is removed, and that we add in that the committee's comments are put forward to the portfolio holder on section 3.8.10 of the report. The suggested changes in 3.8.10 of the report. Do you have a seconder for that amendment? Okay. Can we now discuss the amendment, please, members?
Right, Councillor James, speaking to the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can't support the amendment, and there's a couple of reasons. The first one, most important one, is, well, not perhaps the most important one, but by deleting everything else, we've deleted this critical bit where it says Hampshire County Council. And I appreciate people are reluctant to comment on a report they haven't read, but I think it's been importantly highlighted that there is this report out there. And I think this highlights that fact to the Many Down Executive Committee, who will pick this piece of paper up after we've finished with it. And I think it's absolutely appropriate we highlight the Hampshire County Council report, because it's important they consider all the evidence, and that's part of it. The rest of it, in terms of going along with the suggested changes in 3.8.10, clearly we haven't discussed and we haven't debated, and there's some we may not be happy with, we may wish to change, and so it kind of defeats the object of again, it closes down the debate, which no one wanted to do initially, that we want to discuss these policy points, because some we don't want deleted, some we may not agree with, and we haven't had that discussion. So I think the amendment has to be defeated in order to go back to the original and add a single sentence to the back of the original, which is, and considers the following comments, and then that would be great. So I'll vote against this amendment and then move another one when a chance comes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Equally, the motion can't really, I hope, isn't going to get support, in as much as it hasn't given opportunity for comments to be made on paragraphs 3, 8, 10, pages 11, 12 and 13. There's been questions on it, but there hasn't been comment, because we had the wording put forward to us in the debate on Councillor Potter's wording. So this is completely frustrating and is almost, it appears to me, be a little bit of railroading.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment on Councillor James's reference to whatever it is that is going on at the Hampshire County Council? I don't believe that we should take on board, and I don't think he should take on board, or anybody should take on board, something that is actually not gotten through a committee. It's only a paper that is being put before somebody. So I think it would be quite wrong of any of us to make any comment on that whatsoever.
Councillor Potter.
I mean, if I may, Chairman, I just want to make the point. I mean, I heard what Councillor Parker said. Can I just reassure him it was not my intention to railroad anybody into anything. What I did was to ask advice as to when I might present this, and the last thing I want to do is to forestall constructive comment by Councillor Parker or anybody else in regard to the substance of the original report. I mean, in regard to what I've put forward, which I think had support from others, it seems to me it could nearly be an additional bullet point in its full content to those recommendations, the recommendations that are under 2.1. It doesn't in any way, in my view, contradict the thrust of the recommendation which is in the paper, and I'd like to see it just as an additional bullet point, which I think makes all the points I think Councillor James made a minute ago about whatever people might say. I think it's absolutely important that we are able to make these observations through to others. If, goodness knows, if they are not aware of the scenario that's developing, they certainly should be, and we will do no more than raise their attention to that. Now, I don't want to stop Councillor Parker making the constructive comments that he usually does, and he'll have an opportunity to do that.
Well, we've still got paper on the table that has been proposed and seconded. We can't go back to the original recommendation until we voted on Councillor Tucker's amendment and on the substantive, if necessary, motion. Yes, I've got a case, yes.
The suggestion from the proposer that it becomes a bullet point on the within the recommendations changes the nature of the document from a motion to a proposal to amend the recommendations. Because when you amend the recommendations, you just accept that into it. It changes the nature. It's no longer a motion that stands on its own. It's a suggestion that we change the recommendations and put an extra bullet point in. So we could fall out about the process of debating and debating rules. And I've done debating rules since 1970. And I can tell you, the debating rules are those which we currently wish to agree. So we shouldn't fall out of our debating rules, and we should say, if people want to make additional comment, you don't need to shut things down if you don't want. And I suggested we don't want.
Right, so we can try and clear this muddle up. Can we vote, please, on Councillor Mrs. Tucker's amendment? All those in favour? Oh, for goodness sake.
You're a Tory, you must be against it.
Members, the amendment is to the proposal, the proposed motion is to keep the first paragraph, remove the rest of the proposed motion, and to add in that the committee supports the recommended suggested changes in paragraph 3.8.10. It has been put to the vote, so technically we have to vote on that amendment.
Yes, can we vote on the amendment, please? All those in favour? Against? That is lost. We can vote on this now. Yeah,
So we are back,
yeah we're back on this paper now.
yeah, and we can carry on debating that, or if anyone wishes to propose a further amendment, which could be the original recommendation added to it, then that can happen.
Would I just be able to ask advice through you, Chair and Guy? If I sought to withdraw this, I wouldn't call it a motion, sorry, a revised recommendation document at this juncture, thereby allowing the sort of commentary that I think Councillor Parker wants to make in regard to the substantive report, would I then be allowed to reintroduce it after that is finished? With, yeah, as an additional bullet point to the original recommendation. Only that. Would that be okay?
You cannot put the same motion back. You have to put a different motion back. So technically what you are asking, Councillor Potter, is if you could add it as an additional bullet point to the original recommendation and you have some wording, then yes, you could propose that.
And you have some, sorry, you were saying that there would be some wording. What do you mean, in addition to what I've already circulated, or just what I've circulated?
Councillor Potter, sorry, hoping to clarify this for you once and for all. If you withdraw what you have put to the committee, then you cannot put that exact proposal back again. What you can do is propose a revised proposal as part of the original recommendation.
So, genuinely not trying to be clever but helpful, if I just change one word, that would be okay, would it?
Technically, it would be not the exact same recommendation.
Can I just ask a question to the Cabinet Member first, please? Am I correct in believing that what we're really talking about is what's going to the Manydown Executive next week, and which will then inform what's submitted by the Council to the Planning Inspector on the 4th of October? Am I correct in assuming that? That's your understanding as well. And the officer, is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's what we put forward.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, yeah.
What we put forward from a landowning perspective as a representation to the local plan will be considered by the officers, and it's their choice as to whether they accept it or not. But the other important point around this process is that the inspector, when he or she looks at the EIP inspector, when he or she reviews the local plan, also reviews the submissions that are made. So they don't just review the revised local plan, they also review all the submissions that are made prior to or on the 4th of October.
Informs my suggested amendment, because the last paragraph talks about between now and the end of the year. Right? And it talks about involving the P&I committee and having them have some view about some things. If we're trying to influence what's going to happen between now and the 4th of October, which is really the key date point, I'd suggest, Councillor Potter, that we submit the last paragraph as a separate bullet point to stand or fall on its own, and not committing it to restricting us completing our discussions for submission by the 4th of October. And that, of course, would of course have the effect of changing this to a new arrangement. Thank you.
Right, members, I'm afraid I haven't got that much longer to live, so I hope we can get through this quickly. Would it be helpful if we went to 3.8.10 and went through it
Sorry, Chair.
paragraph by paragraph?
Sorry, Chair. We still
Oh.
need...
I'm happy with the advice I received to withdraw it at this juncture. I hope there's an understanding between us all that it will reappear in one form or another. With the help of one of my learned friends on the right, I'd actually taken out the word "but" in the which I thought in the very last sentence, which might suffice. But I think we can go further than that, because I think Councillor Keating makes a valid point in regard to where this is really destined for. So I think we can come back to this, I hope in good faith with all of you, and let you get on with controlling the debate on those other matters which Councillor Parker wants to refer to.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. So you are withdrawing this pro tem, yes? Thank you. Councillor Keating as seconder, do you agree with that?
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah.
Sorry, Chair, we are now back to the original recommendation on the paper and in debate. The members please indicate if they wish to speak. Councillor Parker, I believe, has got his hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I would then revert back to pages 13 of 35, sorry, start at the front, pages 11 of 35, 12 of 35 and 13 of 35. And I would like to suggest that there is a change to the officer recommendation with regard to the clauses in policy SS3.10 Manydown Basingstoke, and I can quickly guide you through those clauses that are shown as delete in entirety and give forward a suggested change to the wording.
The officer's comments are not recommendation. The only suggested changes, the suggested changes in the whole of that particular part are the final column. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
I would start with, so if any members wanted to have in front of them this particular part of the report, along with pages 11, 12. This is page 44, it starts. It goes over to page 45. Chair, my concern is that there are specific headings that are being deleted from this policy. And all of those headings, in my view, are the soft planning issues, but very important to the sympathetic. When we hear people talk about they want proper planning and sympathetic planning to the area, these are some of the issues that address that. By starting off with the G. I beg your pardon, sorry, I'm not starting off with G, starting off with I. Which is preserve and enhance the architectural and historic significance of the working conservation area. So what is being proposed by the officers on I is delete this clause in its entirety, and for the council to rely on policy EM4 under I, ecology. Yeah. So I would suggest that this should not be deleted as a heading, but it's no reason why it can't just stay as I, ecology, and then it could be put on there, reference to be made to policy EM4. I'm nervous of seeing this sort of heading disappear in its entirety.
I is heritage and it's EM9. Ecology is L and it's EM4.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes,
Could you clarify?
like you, Chair. I beg your pardon. I've lost the will to live almost now as well, but I'm very desperate to make this point. So my apologies to members. I'll go back to then, from confusion of my I's with my L's, I want to then first of all address clause H, which is landscaping sensitivities. And again, this talks about delete this clause. Well, I don't see why we can't have in the reference to this policy for this very sensitive area a heading that specifically addresses landscaping sensitivities. I think in fact it's essential that we have a clause. Then let's not have it as it says the officer's comments, the policy wording is too detailed at this stage in the life of the many-town development. I accept that may be to be the case, but I see no reason why, if officers are also then recommending that we revert back and rely on policy EM1, let's amend the wording to say, under landscaping and sensitivities, reference to be made to policy EM1. And then a second point, master planning to be carried out, because that's what they're saying. They're saying delete this clause as it is best dealt with by policy M1 and during master planning. Well, it's a terrible thing to say, and it's no disrespect to the officer present, but I am nervous of relying on that. And I see no harm in that being changed to, as I say, not to be deleted, but just to be changed to reference should be made to policy EM1 as a separate point, and then secondly, master planning to be carried out. I would then go to I, which is ecology, and again, the same point I would make is that on that one, it should be L. Sorry, L. Yes, there we are. Sorry about this. L. On L, ecology, delete this clause and rely on policy EM4 in the local plan. Well, let's just leave it at ecology, reference to be made to policy EM4. It's a safeguard. And I would imagine and I would understand why any, in the planning worlds of local authority, why any applicant wouldn't want such wording to be included. So that is my recommendation for H and I. And then in respect to the next deleted item, L. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then in K, H, R, A, yeah, ancient monuments, again, yes, sorry, K becomes before K. Delete this clause and rely on existing national policies and guidelines. So again, I don't see why repetition of national policies and guidelines, I see no reason why it just can't say refer to national policies and guidelines. I want to be certain that we are going to ensure, as a local authority, that these very sensitive areas are going to be properly addressed during the planning process. So then I would go to the next deleted item is, just let me quickly check, I want to address is S, which is limit noise impact. And again, this talks about delete this clause and rely on policy EM12 in the local plan. And again, my suggestion is there's no reason why S cannot just say reference should be made to policy EM12. Thank you for your indulgence, members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor James.
I'll be a little bit quicker. N, long-term planning of the borough. There seems a lot of confusion. This is about around the road situation where obviously we want to take out this dual carriageway because at this stage it's unjustified. And then it talks about link roads. And to me, Roman Road, for instance, is a link road in that it links the A339 to Worthing Road, but it's also a local estate road that isn't designed to cope with ring road traffic. It's got lots of junctions off it. So I think dual carriageway may be over-egging it slightly, but I still think that we have to keep the option of a relief road to take traffic from going through either Winkleberry or through Manydown, as traffic generally from Kempshire likes to shoot up to the A339 to get to junction 6 easier. So it seems to suggest that policy needs to be redrafted to remove any reference to the dual carriageway, but I think it's important that within that policy there is some reference to keeping the option open that a ring road could be added depending on the needs of the local roads, because once you've built the houses there and there's no way through it, then there's no way through it. And if you suddenly realise 10 years down the line we need a ring road round that, you can't put it in. So I think it's important that there's a policy included in there that within the Manydown development there will be some ring road around the residential area, so it doesn't become a through route. But I don't know how you word that, but I just want to make the comment for someone else cleverer than me to work out the wording.
I certainly understand the sentiment of what Councillor James just said. I mean, could I say, and I guess I have, is it a minor advantage in terms of being a member of the Members Advisory Panel, but in terms of, and I know this is conceptually, but we always have this image of seeking to detach roads from people rather than the integration of what we all accept, I think, are necessary cars within society. And some of the stuff that's being done in terms of, you know, sort of master planning future is the spine road to go through Manydown itself, dare I say, actually encouraging people to come and see Manydown. I have this terrible image, and I've heard references to this elsewhere, about protecting the residents of Winkleberry from Manydown, having bypasses that avoid Manydown or Cos, creating this as some leper colony nearly. And it just seems to me that what we want to do is to actually have an integrated community there that actually is beneficial to everybody, that actually can have a spine road, that actually has district centres that people actually like and want to go to and actually enjoy, you know, rather than all the traditional concepts of bypasses. So the more open we can leave this, the better. But I don't think that cuts across what Councillor Jones has said, really, but I do think there are other conceptual things that I hope will be developed as this plan evolves.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. You can't have a dual carriageway through a development and not have a dual carriageway through a development. You either have a development with a dual carriageway through it or you don't. Once you have built the development with a spinal road through it, there won't be sufficient space to have a dual carriageway down through it. The reality is that the population extension, the number of houses, the topography of the land, the ownership of the land and the boundaries thereof lend itself to the decision that we don't need a dual carriageway. That doesn't mean that all other developments around the rest of the town and the borough are stopped or are irrelevant. But it means through the Manydown development, this up until 2029, we only need a spine road through the Manydown development, and the intention is that both sides of that road will be developed in order to have a coherent contribution from the people in the Manydown to live together, be community together, and to link to the other bits of the community. You only need a spinal road for that. You can't have a spinal road and a dual carriageway. You either have one or the other. And you can have your dual carriageway after the Manydown is developed, because you won't get it because there will be no space. But you could always have a dual carriageway around it in 2040. No problem. We won't be here then. And we'll be looking back at the planners and we'll be praising them to high heaven because they didn't lock us into a dual carriageway which took us out of Basingstoke or around Basingstoke, instead of taking us through Basingstoke with spinal roads that work. Thank you. But apart from that,
I'm rather alarmed that I'm not going to be here in 2040. I'd like to think I might be, to be honest. But if I'm looking a bit rough, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we build a dual carriageway that we don't need, and never would. I'm just merely stating, and it doesn't have to be within the development land that we've identified in between now and 2029, but we have to keep the option open that we may ultimately need a ring road. Most of our other estates are defined by ring roads. I accept that a spinal road will be wholly appropriate, and I'm looking at the possible designs in this booklet here, wholly appropriate in the short term as the area is developed. But once you get to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 perhaps in the future when the next local plan, hopefully Harthorpe, is being developed, then we have to have that option open. Once you've built it, you can't knock houses down to put in something, a traffic solution. So it's having that long-term view. And so yes, remove dual carriageway, because I don't think a lot of our ring roads aren't dual carriageway. That probably won't be needed. But a ring road that doesn't have very many junctions is critical, because if you, as someone who visits Winklebury on a regular basis, because a lot of my family live there, you can pull out of Furs Way, and trying to get out of Furs Way onto Roman Road is very difficult because it is a through route. People who live in Kempshott and Buckskin who want to get to the Brooksdown Hospital A339. All you're going to do is create another one of those, because obviously a lot of the plans involve capping Roman Road at the top, and therefore the new link road will be the main spine. That will have a lot of traffic, and you have people trying to pull out of little residential cul-de-sacs. So it's keeping the option open. As it grows, we've got to make sure we're aware that in the long term there may be a need for a further link road, ring road, call it what you like, through the development or around the development, and we should be developing with that in mind. I mean, I'd like to think it's the natural boundary. At some point we'll go in to say that's where the development ends, and then there's woodland and countryside, and then there's Oakley as a separate thing that they can be like lepers, away from, because they'd quite happily be away from Basingstoke, I think. Not lepers, that's unfair. Yeah, but they'd like to be away from Basingstoke, and I fully agree. I mean, Many Down will be part of Basingstoke, there's no debating that, but it seems to be that to turn around and say, oh, remove anything to do with dual carriageways, anything to do with, and just deal with this link road, this one single road, is very short term in its view, and we should keep the option open that we may need to do more in the future.
Councillor Mrs Taylor.
I do agree with Councillor James, not about Oakley people being lepers, but about we do have to be far-sighted here, and we've often said that one day, perhaps in the distant future, we are going to need a bypass that goes right down from the A339 right down to junction 7 of the motorway. And you're quite right, if we build houses everywhere, then we've got no choice at all. If we maintain the ridge line for the building of houses, then we have got the land available to us if in the distant future we feel that we need that sort of thing, and it will meet the railway line. Thank you. It will meet the railway line just at the point that has been identified as the optimum point for crossing the two railway lines where they're both together and they're in a dip. And so I think, I know that you're probably going to say, well, this isn't part of our problem, we haven't got to think of this sort of thing, but in the council we do, and I think that bit of land could be preserved for a road, dual carriage, whatever, that can sweep right round the edge of the whole Many Down estate. And so, yes, you will, and then one day we will be building south. You're quite right, but obviously in this plan period we won't.
Mr Bailey, you wish to join?
Yeah, it's a point of clarification, just so that we're all clear. The point roughly north of the Worting Road, going north to northeast of the Worting Road, all the way up to the A339, that land could not, well, if you were to build a substantive link road, we'll avoid the use of the word dual carriageway for a minute, but if you were to build a substantive link road, that land, there isn't enough space for it to be able to accommodate enough houses to be able to be lived in. If you were to safeguard for a substantive link road, it's the same effect. So the points that we were making earlier, I was making earlier, you need to bear in mind in relation to the road going northeast of Worting up to the A339, in terms of the overall concept of the borough and the council maybe at some point needing, from a borough-wide perspective, another road on the western side of Basingstoke. that really isn't something that is a landowner perspective. It's a council perspective. But what I can say, and I think it is actually fairly clear in the suggested changes, that from the point round the Worthing Road south, that we're actually offering to safeguard for that potential. But the key thing, and it was the point I was making earlier, so we're absolutely clear about this, it would be a constraint if a substantive link road or a dual carriageway was safeguarded from the land, across the land just north of the Worthing Road, going north-northeast to the A339. That would have the effect of substantially reducing the number of houses that we were able to develop because of the way that the space and the topography works, and it would sever communities and wouldn't enable a properly planned development. So I just need to be absolutely clear about that, so that you know. It's not that we don't understand the principle, it's just we're trying to be absolutely clear about how we could safeguard and where we could safeguard for that principle.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Yes. So I move the suspension of standing orders. And the next speaker was Councillor Tilbury.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Richard sort of has made a lot of the points I was going to make, because I think it's important, this issue of the road. I mean, I suppose those of us who are on the map, I'm on there as well, Dave and Marilyn and Sean, and we have a much greater understanding of what they're looking at and the sort of community they're trying to develop, and it isn't one that's going to be bisected by very large roads. They're trying to get away from that. So, well, yeah, but that's the point. You create a distinct boundary. That's the end. Like you said, and if you put it around the edge of the park, that's like Basingstoke. That park's over there, the other side of the road. They're trying to get away from that sort of thing and create something much more organic. And the idea is, yes, it may cause problems for traffic in a way, but the point is you don't want a lot of traffic. This is supposed to be a community where people live, not worry about their children being run over by a car. And I think without an understanding that, and I think that's the problem, I think the work of the map needs to be sort of broadened out, or the people who are aware of it, because otherwise we're doing the work in isolation to everybody else. And obviously, you know, people, one of the things that's always come up with many down is, oh, you can't develop it unless you've got a link road. We certainly know who's responsible for much of that sort of stuff, because of course it's very expensive, it takes up loads of land, and it makes it, you can't actually do the work, you know. I mean, so you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, and you can't develop many down by saving it. And that's the problem we've got with this, you know. We're sort of struggling with this, is who's actually pushing this, because all we see is obstacles being put in the way to sort of reduce the amount of land, so that it actually, and that's what this report clearly says, is if we go forward with what's in the local plan, you can't actually develop many down in a viable way. And I think people need to wake up to that, and I think we need some clarity from, you know, where this is coming from, and from the county as well, because they seem to have some very odd ideas down there. You know, well, one, they're sort of saying we're supporting this, but in other areas they're not. And certainly some of them down there aren't, and I saw that very well when I stood in the county elections there, you know, standing against county councillors who were sort of talking about the threat of Manydown coming back again. Well, who's threatening it? We're Hampshire County Council, one of our business partners, so I think they need to wake up and get their own house in order as well. You know, I mean, the report is fairly clear. Richard is asking for these changes, because otherwise this isn't going to go in. And what we'll end up with is a local plan going forward, and the plan inspector saying, sorry, you can't put Manydown in again. The same as last time, you're going to have to build on all the other sites around the area, and a lot of them are already in my ward. We're already landed a load. They're built on the other side, on the Basing side, built all over Overton, more and Overton, Whitchurch, even more everywhere else, because Manydown won't be viable. Or he may turn around and say, well, you might get away with building 1,000, 2,000, but if we don't build 3,000 houses, you've got to build them somewhere else. We've accepted the housing number, so this has got to be viable. And some people, you know, I think David suggests some people in the cabinet need to wake up to that. I think, you know, no doubt councillor is its sincerity, because he's pushed this through, but I'm not sure he's getting the support from the rest of the cabinet. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Yeah, I must have misunderstood the word dissect, because from what I understand is that rather than leave the option of a road round the edge of Basingstoke, which would dissect the town, or dissect Manydown, we want to have a link road that may get very busy through the middle of Manydown to avoid dissecting. and I just fear that in 30 years, well, not at the moment, we haven't built anything yet, but I'm just thinking in 3,000 to 4,000 houses time, it will be busy. When Roman Road's cut off at the end, it will be busy because all the traffic that currently goes on Roman Road to cut through will be cutting through that road. I just think explore the option. In terms of G, policy G, it does mention in there, which is where we might get some agreement, to amend the policy boundaries on the proposed map to include the western boundaries of plots 4 and 5 from Tybalt's report. So this is the bit that references the pink, the salmon area. It goes on to say to identify the need for sensitive treatment of the western edges of the development in relation to landscaping, the working land, in relation to heritage policy. I just think the sensitive bit could be, I mean, we said we could fit 3,000 there, we've looked again, we said no we can't, we need the salmon bit. But do we need, as Councillor Taylor pointed out earlier, all the salmon bits put in a junction and to earmark a centre? Roads aren't particularly wide, and we're talking obviously dual carriageway, we're not talking an extra motorway. I can't see, as we own the land beyond that as well, whether or not along there we're not going to build right up to the dotted line in the first phases. So there is room there to consider, as the development progresses, whether or not saying that I'm not against opening up the salmon area to development, but I just think the fringes of the salmon development could be the appropriate place for that road to be considered in future.
Okay, just for clarification, and I think I was going to answer Councillor Taylor's follow-up question, so I'll answer it now, and hopefully this helps as well, Councillor James. From that point, just north of the Worthing Road, if we had to go northeast in terms of a wider link road, it would be a problem. I think I've made that clear. That doesn't mean to say that we could not potentially safeguard for a route that didn't go northeast. Well, it probably couldn't go directly north, because north of there that you're looking at, you've got a ridge, a west-east ridge, so you've got topographical issues. There's a west-east, there's a significant west-east ridge at the edge of that woodland. So there's some topographical issues that would probably mitigate it going directly north through the salmon thing, but just for clarification, that doesn't mean to say we couldn't safeguard an area on the salmon area for an eventual routing that may go round. But I think the other thing to say is in the report, I'm going to refer to paragraph numbers because I haven't got your page numbers, but in the report it says paragraph number well, I think it's 3.93 onwards. So 3.93, 3.94, 3.95, 3.96, 3.97. It effectively says that there is a recognition, the council has made a recognition or has a recognition that there could need to be at a future point in time some form of additional road infrastructure for the borough over and above the development link road for Manydown. And so that process will carry on in the way it's been explained. There will be some studies with the Highway Authority and with County to be able to look at that issue in the context of when and where the need is for that kind of, which is obviously beyond the local plan period. But there is a process for that to happen, and we as a landowner are saying, and it's what's in the suggested changes, it's incorporated in the suggested changes, so I'm just clarifying this. We are saying that where we can safeguard for that potential or a potential routing, wherever that might be, without stopping the ability of Manydown developing and producing 3,000 homes in the plan period, we will. And the areas are, broadly speaking, on that western side that you've drawn attention to, and broadly speaking, south of the Worthing Road, either side of the railway line, and south in our land holding, but not outside of our land holding, all the way down to the edge of the southern boundary of our land holding. So we're not saying we won't, as landowners, safeguard for a potential routing in the future. We're just saying that it is right and proper we safeguard in the appropriate places in order to develop Manydown as we need to in order to deliver 3,000 homes in the local plan period.
Thank you. That's
I totally agree with all of that, but unfortunately, unless it's actually in the policy somewhere, and if we delete it entirely, it's gone. As long as it's in the policy somewhere, I'm quite happy with that. Yeah.
That's what the suggested changes are saying.
Councillor Mrs Taylor.
Could I just add in a concern about the strategic gap issue? I know that you're looking to amend it so that you can creep further westwards. But I'm very nervous about not having a strategic gap policy, because this is one of the key components of our local plan, and also the neighbourhood plan area of Oakley. I don't see that it's necessary to exclude many downland, which is quite a lot of the land, because the only purpose of the Oakley plan is to find 150 houses around Oakley, and if many downland is what they want, they'll ask for it. And I don't see exactly, I mean, but they don't have any influence. You're still the owners of the land and can promote it whenever you like. I don't see that they can have influence over the majority of the many downland that's in that parish. And I just think I think it sounds very unreasonable and heavy-handed to try and undo what they've already done, which is have an agreement on the area that they've got the neighbourhood plan in.
Just for clarification, both of those points are points that we need to make in order for us to be able to deliver the development, not built development necessarily, because it, and particularly in the strategic gap, it could involve safeguarding development that we've just referred to, or ways that we need to carry on, ways that we need to protect and ensure safeguarding development for future purposes. So both of those points are planning processes that we have to go through, and they'd be recognised, and the intent would be recognised, as we've said in the report, in order for the inspector to then consider that Many Down could be developed in the context of those policies. And so it needs to be a process that we're going through, and the evidence that we're demonstrating for that is set out in the paper.
Right, thank you, members. Any further speakers on the debate? I'm hoping perhaps Natty can let us know exactly what the bullet points that we've got together.
I mean, having, with your agreement, done what I did, I mean, can I reintroduce?
In a moment,
okay.
Potter.
Right.
Okay, in summary, members, from the latter part of our discussion, the committee's comments are around section 3.8.10 on pages 11, 12 and 13, SS 3.10, the suggested changes column, that there's concern around specific headings being deleted, and there is a comment that the change of wording should say under H, reference to be made to EM1, master planning to be carried out. On L, reference to be made to EM3, sorry, I am right, EM3, EM4, and me at it now. On K, reference to the wording should say reference to national policies and guidelines, and on S, it should say reference to EM12. There on N, there is concern around the long-term planning of the borough, and members have expressed concern around options concerning the dual carriageway, and that would like to ensure that a policy is kept in, that there will be a ring road or a link road or something of that nature as part of the Many Down development, but it does not necessarily have to be a dual carriageway, and longer term consideration needs to be kept open to consider that. Yes, around the Many Down development. Again, an expression that we need to take a long-term view and be aware that anything going through the development would have an impact on the communities that are there, will be there, and they should not, their quality of life should not be impacted upon by the roads there. and concern about the strategic gap and a desire to ensure that there is a policy that retains the gap, and an expression of concern around the exclusion of the Manydown development from the Oakley neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm amazed that you can do that. It is very clever, isn't it? Yes. Councillor Potter, you wanted to sort of stick your bit on the bottom, did you?
Well, you could describe it like that, Chairman, if you want, but I thought it was slightly better than that. But what I'd like to do, Chairman, I think it has been said, because I don't think what I've tried to put in here contradicts much of what has come from the debate tonight, and therefore, supports rather than destroys the comments that people have made. I'd like to see it appear as a bullet point in its own right, added to the recommendation. And if we do that, and I think Councillor Keating was the one who said it some time ago, clearly the thrust of this, and I'm reminded of it, is really for it to find its way into the Manydown Executive Committee process, so that they are cognizant of the comments that have been made tonight and are aware of the urgency and concern that we've expressed on a number of matters.
Right, members. Come on, it's nearly breakfast time. Yeah, please do.
Can you just...
From the chair, I'm going to move the recommendation at 2.1, that we note the progress made to date, and that we take into account the comments that Natalie's so kindly written down for us. Are we all agreed on that? Going on to that.
1 second.
Yeah.
We'll be back where we were.
We'll do it in 3 bullet points. The first one is noting the progress, the second one is the comments that we've made, and the third one will be Councillor Potter's paper. But yes, we will. Yes. Right. So can we vote on the first that we note the progress made to date? We agreed on that. Thank you, members. And then the comment on the contents that Natalie so kindly read out for us. So we agreed on that. Thank you. And the third item is Councillor Potter's. I'll scribble. Yeah.
Bullet point.
Bullet point.
proposal.
Yes.
What about this one?
No,
not
there's
ours.
the recommendations for they're just for your awareness.
Yes, this is ours.
That's the MEC.
Yeah.
Okay, right. It's recommended that the NEC notes are done.
Yes, but you're not the MEC, you're EPP.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, that's quite right.
Well, it may be so, but I don't agree, Chair. Right?
Don't argue
Well-
with the referee.
well-
I'll send you off with the red card.
Well, you can if you want, but I'm entitled to make a point.
You are.
Yeah.
Right, so
God's sake. If the paper says it is recommended from here that the MEC delegates authority to the portfolio holder, then we're asked to comment on that, and I'm saying we should be saying we approve and agree with that. That's all I'm saying. It's not rocket science, and it's not revolutionary.
Look at the second bullet point. It says considers the views of the EPP OSCOM. So we're going to consider our own views.
Richard may be able to help.
Sorry, Councillor, can I just double check the 2.2? What is it you're saying? Just if you just repeat what you're saying again, because so you're saying that that this committee approves 2.2. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. No, I understand what he's saying. Sorry, just so that we're clear, the reason for adding in 2.2 is so that EPP OSCOM were fully aware of what was going to be assessed by MEC and that what you're saying, Councillor, as I understand it, is that you approve 2.2 in that context.
Yeah, that we have a value in approving it. There is a value in approving it here.
Back to the third
Yeah,
bullet point.
going back to the third bullet point, Councillor Potter, can you confirm that it's the whole thing in its entirety? You're not changing it in any way?
What he has to change.
Yeah, you've got to change a word.
The last paragraph is separate.
I'm trying to, I mean, I know it's late, Chairman, forgive me. Could I speak just when you've got your mic on? And I'm gathering across the table that there are elements that are probably upsetting people even at this late hour. So if I can help on that, could you give, sorry, I say colleagues, probably an overstatement, isn't it really, but councillors on the opposite side of the table the opportunity just to comment on that, and we'll see where we go very quickly in terms of amendment, and then we'll move it forward.
I would like you to just say what your recommendation is without all the, the sort of criticism bit that goes first, really.
I'm not opposed to that, Chairman. I mean, I've had a good run tonight anyway, and I guess people have picked up on the nuances of this. I mean, certainly the last 3 paragraphs, I think, are still relevant, yeah? And I would like those to go forward in their own right. Would you be happy with that, Councillor Taylor?
Take a vote on.
Trying to make some progress. A seconder? Yeah, okay.
Members,
Like to vote.
would you like to vote on the last 3 paragraphs of Councillor Potter's amendment?
They've removed those.
No, that's removed.
Sorry, do you want me to clarify, Chair?
Just to clarify, members, the third bullet point to the recommendation as proposed is the last 3 paragraphs on the piece of paper that Councillor Potter put before us earlier. So would you like me to read those out, members, so we're clear? Or are you happy? Okay. So we now need to agree or not agree. Those members may wish to take a vote on that. Sorry, Chair, it's 1 bullet point that covers those 3 paragraphs on the piece of paper that Councillor Potter has put before us.
Right, with that clarification from the officer, those in favour, please show. And those against.
What about me? Just to count me?
Yes, you can.
So I'm against or for?
So, members, can we do that again, please? Members, if you're in favour of the recommendation, can you please put your hands up now? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And against?
That will go forward as the third bullet point to the recommendation at 2.1. All agreed? Thank you.
Right, okay. That's it. So happy to meeting.
Right. Safe journey home, everybody, and thank you for an interesting evening.
Well done.